My hands were still trembling when I realized the photograph on my hallway wall had been moved again, tilted just slightly, the way it always was after she left the house. I stood there in the dim yellow light, my breath catching in my throat because I knew I hadn't touched it. And yet there it was, angled like a silent message I didn't understand. That was the moment I realized the line between coincidence and intrusion had finally disappeared. Something was happening inside my home, something I could feel but couldn't name. And it all started the day I befriended that woman. I'm Mary, 55 years old, and loneliness had begun settling into my bones like cold rain. After my husband passed 3 years ago, the house felt like a museum of echoes. His tools still hanging in the garage, his books stacked on the bedside table, his scent fading slowly from his shirts that I couldn't bring myself to give away. My daughter, Clara, lived 2 states away and visited only when work allowed, which meant visits were rare. I had my routines, my plants, my morning walks, my attempts at pretending I was doing just fine. But the truth was simple and heavy. The house was too quiet. Maybe that's why I let my guard down. Maybe that's why I invited her in. Her name was Evelyn. I met her one rainy afternoon at the cafe near my street, where she sat alone with a cup of tea and a notebook she kept opening and closing, as if the words inside were too fragile to be exposed. She looked about my age, soft eyes, gentle voice, the kind of person you instinctively want to trust. When the storm outside turned violent, she laughed and said she was stranded without a ride. I offered to drive her home, but instead of giving me an address, she asked if she could stay a little longer, just until the rain calmed. We talked for nearly an hour. She told me she had recently moved to town but felt overwhelmed and alone. There was a familiar sadness in her voice, one that mirrored my own. When she finally asked if I lived nearby, something inside me softened. I invited her over for tea. That was the beginning. For the first week, her visits were harmless. She would show up with pastries or small gifts, or books she insisted I needed to read. She listened intently when I spoke about my husband, nodding with such empathy that it almost hurt. She asked questions, personal ones, but she asked them gently. I didn't realize she was mapping me, learning me, studying my vulnerabilities. I just thought she cared. It wasn't until I found her standing in my late husband's study that I felt a flicker of unease. She smiled apologetically and said she was looking for the bathroom. I brushed it off, but afterward I noticed that one of his journals had been nudged an inch out of place. I convinced myself it was my imagination. Then the noises started. Late at night, when the house was supposed to be still, I heard creaks on the stairs, slow, deliberate. Sometimes footsteps in the hallway followed by the faintest whisper of movement, like someone brushing against the wall. At first, I blamed the house settling. Old homes do that. But one night, I heard it clearly. 4 steps, a pause, 3 more steps, like someone walking in the dark. I tried to tell myself that I was still adjusting to loneliness, that grief played tricks on the mind. But when the living room lamp flickered 3 times in a row each time Evelyn visited, something inside me tightened in fear. It wasn't just the noises. Things began disappearing. Small things at first. A hairpin, a scarf, a key I was sure I always left on the hook by the door. Then important things. My husband's watch, the silver locket my mother gave me before she died. I tore the house apart looking for them, but they were simply gone. Evelyn always appeared at the right moment, offering comfort. Her timing was uncanny, too uncanny. She would show up the very minute I was overwhelmed, distressed, or searching for something I'd lost. And every time she'd tilt her head and say softly, "Maybe you're just tired, Mary. Grief clouds our memory." Her words soothed me, even when they shouldn't have. One afternoon, after another restless night, I went to make myself tea and saw her in my backyard, standing completely still, staring into my kitchen window. I froze. When I opened the door, she smiled and said she happened to be in the neighborhood and wanted to check on me. I forced a smile back, but unease washed over me like chilled water. The fence gate had been locked. Had she climbed over it? I didn't ask. I didn't want the answer. My daughter noticed something was wrong during one of her rare visits. She said I seemed distracted, on edge, paranoid. When I tried to explain about the noises and missing items, she frowned in that patronizing way young adults do when they think their aging parent is becoming forgetful. But when she asked who that woman was, the one she saw leaving the house earlier, I felt a shiver crawl down my spine. I hadn't told Clara about Evelyn. Why had I kept her a secret, even from my own daughter? That question lingered in my mind, growing heavier by the day. I realized I knew almost nothing about her. She always changed the subject when I asked about her past. She never talked about family. She never disclosed where she lived, always brushing it off with a vague, "Oh, not far from here." And she never let me drive her home again. Not once. Still, I didn't push her. Part of me feared losing the only companionship I had left, even if that companionship came wrapped in mystery. But everything changed one night when I woke to the sound of my bedroom door opening. My heart leapt into my throat. The room was dark, except for the faint moonlight spilling through the curtains. I stayed perfectly still, my breath trapped in my chest. I heard soft footsteps crossing the floor, slow, calculated. Then the subtle sound of my dresser drawer sliding open. My blood ran cold. I wanted to scream but couldn't. My throat tightened with terror. And then just as silently as it started, the presence retreated. The door clicked shut. I didn't dare move until sunrise. When I finally gathered the courage to inspect the room, I saw it. The velvet box where I kept my husband's wedding ring, opened and empty. That was the moment the truth became undeniable. Someone was inside my house at night, and there was only one person who held a spare key. Evelyn. I felt sick, physically sick, as the realization settled in. Every gift, every visit, every comforting word. It was all part of something else, something darker. But that was only the beginning of what I would eventually uncover. Something far more disturbing was woven into her presence in my life. Something I never could have imagined. The morning after the ring disappeared, I sat at the edge of my bed for almost an hour, unable to move, unable to breathe normally. The sunlight filtering through my curtains felt wrong. Too bright, too warm, for the kind of horror that had settled into my chest. My husband's ring wasn't just jewellery. It was the last piece of him I kept close, the thing I held whenever I needed strength. For it to be gone, for someone to take it from the drawer beside my bed while I slept, that felt like a violation so deep it hollowed me out. I remember walking through the house that morning with my heart thudding in my ears. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow looked suspicious. I kept expecting to find a window cracked open, a door unlocked, a footprint on the floor. But everything looked normal, too normal. As if the night had never happened, as if the house itself was gaslighting me. At noon she came. Evelyn knocked on my door with her familiar gentle rhythm. 3 soft taps, a pause, then 2 more. I froze. My first instinct was to pretend I wasn't home, to stay silent and hide in the kitchen until she left. But she called my name through the door, her voice laced with concern, and something about the way she said it cracked me open. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. When I opened the door, she stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, brushing past me with that same air of quiet familiarity she had cultivated from the beginning. She carried a small tray with homemade soup, saying she'd made it for me because she sensed something was wrong yesterday. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to ask her how she always seemed to sense things I hadn't told her, things she had no way of knowing. Instead, I just stared at her. She placed the tray on the counter and turned to look at me, her expression softening. "Mary, what's the matter?" The words clawed out of my chest before I could stop them. Something happened last night. Someone was in my room. For a moment, her face remained still, too still. But then she reached for my hands, squeezing them between her cold fingers. "Oh, Mary," she whispered, "you must have had a nightmare." "It wasn't a nightmare," I snapped, pulling my hands away. "My husband's ring is gone." She blinked once, slowly. "Gone?" "Missing," I corrected, though the word felt insufficient. "Someone took it." She took a step closer, her voice dropping into a soothing whisper. "Grief does strange things to the mind. You've been under so much stress. Are you sure you didn't misplace it?" The way she said it, so calm, so gently patronizing, made something inside me twist. I wanted her to leave, but then her face softened even further, her eyes glistening with manufactured sympathy. "If you want," she said, "I can help you look." I shook my head. "No, I think I'd like to be alone today." For the first time since we met, a flicker of something unfamiliar crossed her face. Not hurt, not worry, irritation. It was quick, barely a second, but unmistakable. She covered it immediately with a smile, kissed my cheek, whispered she'd check on me later, and left. I locked the door behind her. That afternoon, Clara called again. She must have sensed the strain in my voice the day before, because she didn't bother with small talk. "Mum, I'm coming to stay for a week," she said abruptly. "You don't sound okay." I wanted to protest, to tell her I could handle things, but the truth was, I was terrified. So I said yes. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of safety, knowing someone else would be in the house with me. But that night, before Clara arrived, I had to face something I'd been avoiding. I needed to check the security cameras. My husband installed them years ago. Quiet little devices tucked into corners, barely noticeable. I had stopped using them after he died because the constant beeping and notifications made the house feel even emptier. But I remembered they were still connected somewhere. I turned on the old monitor in the living room. The screen flickered to life, static dancing across the surface before the footage appeared. My stomach dropped. Every camera feed showed the same thing. Endless, black, as if they'd been turned off manually. But then something strange happened. One camera, the one facing the front door, glitched for a moment, revealing a brief flicker of recorded footage before going black again. It lasted only a second, maybe two, but long enough for me to see her. Evelyn. Standing at my front door at 3 a.m, holding something small in her hand. My heart hammered. I rewound the feed manually, frame by frame. Most of it was corrupted, but I managed to catch a single static-filled moment. Evelyn's face illuminated by the porch light, her eyes strangely hollow, her expression devoid of her usual warmth. She wasn't knocking. She was unlocking the door. My blood turned to ice. That key! The spare one I had given her just for emergencies. At the time it had felt like a comforting gesture, a way to keep the loneliness at bay. Now it felt like the biggest mistake of my life. By the time Clara arrived the next day, I was a wreck. She took one look at me and demanded to know what was going on. I told her everything. The noises, the missing things, the ring, the nighttime intrusion. I expected disbelief, maybe frustration, but instead, her face hardened. "Mum, this is serious." I nodded, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of validation. That evening, Clara insisted on staying in my room with me so I could sleep. She placed a chair by the door, locked it, and left the hallway light on. I finally drifted off, exhausted. Around 2 a.m, I woke to Clara gripping my arm. "Mum," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Someone is in the house." My entire body went rigid. We held, our breath, listening. There it was, footsteps in the hallway, slow, heavy, and then a hauntingly familiar pattern. 4 steps, a pause, 3 more. Clara's fingers tightened around mine. "Call the police," she mouthed. But before I could reach for my phone, something slid under my bedroom door. A note. Clara crawled forward, grabbed it, and held it up to the sliver of hallway light, her face drained of colour. I took it from her hands, my heart pounding. The note said one sentence, written in delicate, looping cursive. "You shouldn't shut me out, Mary, not after everything I've done for you." My breath left me in a sharp, helpless gasp, because I recognised the handwriting. It was identical to the writing in my husband's old journals. Clara stared at the note as if it were burning her fingers, and for a moment neither of us spoke. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, the room shrinking around me, suffocating me with the weight of something I didn't yet understand. How could it be his handwriting? My husband's script was distinct, sharp, deliberate, with a slight backward slant he'd had since childhood. I'd watched him write in those journals for decades. I knew every curve of every letter. And now here it was, slipped under my bedroom door in the middle of the night by someone who had no business being inside my home at all. Clara whispered, "Mum, what is this? How could she?" "I don't know," I breathed, the words barely escaping my lips. "I don't know." We didn't move. We didn't speak. We just sat there, listening to the silence that followed the footsteps in the hallway. At some point, the sound stopped completely, but neither of us dared to open the door. It felt like the house was holding its breath with us. After several long minutes, Clara grabbed her phone and typed frantically, "I'm calling the police now." I nodded, my body still frozen, my mind spiralling in too many directions at once. Fear, confusion, disbelief, and something much darker. A small growing suspicion I didn't have the courage to acknowledge yet. When the police finally arrived, they searched the house thoroughly. Every room, every closet, every nook and corner big enough for a person to hide. They found nothing. No sign of our forced entry, no footprints, no broken locks, nothing disturbed. They looked at the note with mild interest, but didn't say much. To them, it was simple. Someone had a key. Someone I trusted. I felt sick. Clara stood beside me with crossed arms, glaring at the officer's casual tone as if they didn't grasp the danger. They suggested changing the locks, installing new cameras, and staying somewhere else temporarily. It all sounded logical, reasonable, but logic didn't help the knot inside my chest, the one tightening every time I replayed the image of her standing at my front door in the middle of the night. As the officers left, Clara closed the door behind them and turned to me sharply. "Mum, I need you to tell me everything about this woman, everything." I tried. I really did. But the more I talked, the more I realised how little sense it all made. I described how we met, how she seemed so kind, so gentle. I explained the gifts, the visits, the way she always showed up at the perfect moment. I told her about the noises, the missing items, and the flicker of her face on the camera feed. But when I reached the part about the handwriting, my voice cracked. "I don't understand it," I whispered. "How could she know his writing?" Clara didn't answer. She was pacing, thinking in rapid, angry bursts. Okay, tomorrow we're changing the locks, and I'm staying the entire week. You're not staying. Here alone. Not for a minute. I should have felt safer. I should have felt protected. But the fear didn't loosen. If anything, it grew heavier, because now it wasn't just about me. My daughter was involved, and Evelyn was unpredictable. That night, Clara insisted we move a dresser in front of the door. We placed a chair under the doorknob. It felt ridiculous at first, like something out of a movie, but the memory of those footsteps made my hands shake. Sleep didn't come easily. When it did, It came in fragments. Brief, shallow waves of rest interrupted by every sound the house made. I kept jerking awake, convinced someone was standing in the doorway. By morning, both of us were exhausted. Clara began calling locksmiths as soon as the sun rose. While she arranged an appointment, I hovered by the window, staring out at the quiet street. The world outside looked so normal. Children were riding their bikes, neighbours were out walking their dogs, and yet inside my home everything felt wrong. Then, around 9 a.m., my doorbell rang. My heart stopped. Clara froze. She stared at me, waiting for some signal. I didn't have one. She walked to the door slowly, keeping her body pressed against the wall as she peered through the peephole. Her face paled. "It's her," she whispered. "Evelyn." Before I could say anything, Clara pulled away from the door and shook her head fiercely. "Don't answer. Mom, don't you dare answer." But Evelyn called my name softly through the door, her voice trembling with emotion. "Mary, please. I know you're upset. I didn't mean to frighten you." I felt myself backing away instinctively, my pulse racing. Clara clenched her jaw. "She shouldn't even know you're upset. We didn't say anything." But that wasn't true. I remembered that moment, yesterday, when I told her I wanted to be alone. The look on her face, the irritation quickly masked, and the note, the history it implied, the handwriting that matched a dead man's. How far did her knowledge go? Evelyn continued calling my name, her voice growing more desperate. "Mary, please open the door. I need to explain. There are things you don't know, things I've been trying to tell you." Clara grabbed my arm. "Do not open that door." And I didn't. For several minutes, Evelyn remained outside, her voice rising with a mixture of frustration and pleading. Then, abruptly, she stopped. Silence. We heard footsteps retreating. Clara waited nearly 10 full minutes before daring to look outside. When she checked the window, she hissed a sharp breath. "She's still there, just standing across the street, staring at the house." My stomach turned violently. For the next 3 hours, she didn't move, not an inch. She just stood there, watching my front door like a sentry, like she was waiting for me to make a mistake. When the locksmith arrived, he cast a nervous glance toward her. "Is she with you?" he asked. "No," Clara replied firmly. "Just ignore her." He worked quickly, installing new locks on every exterior door. While he worked, I felt Evelyn's eyes on me through the window. It made my skin crawl, like invisible fingers were brushing my spine. When the locksmith left, Clara locked every door and pulled me into the living room. "We're going to the police again," she said firmly. "This is stalking." But before she could finish dialing, something happened that froze both of us in place. A loud, sharp clatter came from the kitchen. We spun toward the doorway, then came another sound. A slow, deliberate movement, a drawer sliding open. Clara grabbed my hand and held her breath, and then we heard it, a voice, soft, whispering, coming from inside the house. "I told you, Mary." My blood ran cold. "You shouldn't shut me out." Clara dialed 911 with shaking hands. But deep down, I knew something far more terrifying than a break-in was coming to the surface. Something connected to my husband. Something connected to Evelyn. Something I had overlooked for far too long. And the truth was about to unravel everything I thought I knew. The operator's voice was still echoing faintly through Clara's phone when the whispering in the kitchen stopped. Silence fell so suddenly that it felt unnatural, like the air itself had frozen. I didn't dare breathe. Clara tightened her grip on my arm, her eyes fixed on the doorway as if she were preparing for something to step through it at any moment. But nothing happened. No footsteps, no movement. Just the faint hum of the refrigerator, the clock ticking on the wall, and the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Clara mouthed, "Stay here." And I grabbed her hand, shaking my head violently. "No," I whispered. "We stay together." but she gently pried her fingers from mine and moved toward the kitchen anyway, her body stiff with fear, yet determined. Something about watching my daughter, my child, walk toward danger for my sake ignited an overwhelming wave of guilt inside me. I should have been protecting her, not dragging her into this nightmare. When she reached the kitchen doorway, she froze. I watched her shoulders rise and fall as she inhaled slowly. Then she stepped inside. I followed, unable to stay away. The drawer, the one that had made the noise, was fully open. Inside, the utensils had been rearranged, neatly, too neatly, like someone had taken the time to place each piece of silverware in a perfectly straight line, all the handles facing the same direction. I swallowed hard. I didn't do that. Clara shook her head. I know. And then I noticed something else. There, sitting right at the front of the drawer, placed deliberately on top of the silverware, was my husband's ring. The same ring that had gone missing from the drawer beside my bed. Clara gasped. Mum, she put this here. But I didn't pick it up. I couldn't. My fingers trembled as I stared at it, my throat tightening. It looked the same. The familiar golden band, the small engraving inside. But something about it felt wrong. It shouldn't have been here, and it certainly shouldn't have been put back like this, displayed almost ceremoniously, like an offering or a warning. The police arrived moments later, knocking hard enough to rattle the front door. Clara rushed to let them in while I remained in the kitchen, unable to tear my eyes away from the ring. 2 officers entered cautiously, hands near their holsters, moving room to room with precision. Clara explained everything, every last detail, in a rushed, breathless stream of words. I stayed silent, my mind spinning in circles. When the officers finally returned from their sweep of the house, their expressions were grim. No one's inside, one of them said. But we heard her, Claire insisted. We heard someone. We checked every potential hiding place, the officer replied. Unless someone exited through a window, they're not here, and all the windows are locked from the inside. Clara pressed her hand to her forehead. So, what, the house is haunted now? I flinched at her tone, not because she was wrong to be frustrated, but because the officers exchanged a look I couldn't decipher. A brief flicker of something like doubt or suspicion. I forced my voice to work. This isn't imagination. Someone was in my house. Someone moved that drawer, and someone put that ring there. The officer nearest me softened his tone. Ma'am, we're not dismissing your experience, but without evidence of forced entry, and with new locks in place, it's strange. Highly strange. Clara opened her mouth to argue again, but I stopped her. I didn't want to fight them. I wanted answers. Real ones. Verifiable ones. Answers that would explain why Evelyn knew things she shouldn't, why she seemed to appear at impossible moments, why she had a key that should no longer work, and why my husband's handwriting had appeared on that note. The officers took statements, advised us to stay vigilant, and left with promises of increased patrols in the neighbourhood. When the door closed behind them, Clara turned to me, her face pale but determined. Mum, I need to show you something, and you need to be honest with me. My breath caught. Show me what? She disappeared into the guest room and returned moments later holding a small notebook I didn't recognise. Its cover was dark green, faded at the edges. The elastic band stretched nearly to breaking. When I was packing my bag to come here, she said quietly, I grabbed Dad's journals from my house, the ones you gave me years ago. A jolt ran through me. Why? Because I wanted to look for handwriting clues, she said. I don't know. Something just felt off. She placed the notebook in my hands and opened it to a page she had bookmarked. My stomach twisted so violently I had to grip the counter behind me. The page wasn't just familiar, it was identical. My husband's handwriting. But more than that, the sentence written on the page matched the note exactly. You shouldn't shut me out, Mary. Not after everything I've done for you. My knees buckled. I clutched the countertop, struggling to breathe. Clara steadied me. Mum, he wrote this years ago. It was from the week you and he fought about him working too much. Remember? I remembered. Too vividly. The argument, the silence afterward, the way he'd written in his journal for hours that night. But how did Evelyn know the exact sentence? How did she replicate his handwriting perfectly? Why slip it under my door in the middle of the night? Clara continued, her voice trembling. Mum, have you told Evelyn anything about Dad? Anything personal? I shook my head. No, nothing that specific. I never mentioned that sentence. I haven't looked at these journals in years. Clara's eyes darkened. Then how did she know? My thoughts spiraled. Had Evelyn been in my house more times than I realized? Had she gone? Through my drawers? My boxes? My memories? Had she touched things that belonged to my husband? The realization felt like a knife sliding between my ribs. I barely heard Clara whisper, She's obsessed with you, Mum. I stared at her. What? Clara swallowed hard. This isn't just stalking. This isn't just someone wanting attention or trying to manipulate you. This is someone who wants a place in your life she doesn't deserve. Someone who thinks she knows you. Someone who thinks she deserves what Dad had. The room tilted around me. That's why she took the ring, Clara continued. That's why she put it back. She wants you dependent, vulnerable, alone with her. I shook my head, unable to believe it. But why? Why me? Clara hesitated. Then she whispered something that made my blood run cold. Mum, what if she knew Dad? The air left my body. Knew him? Before me? During me? After him? I couldn't fathom it, couldn't accept it. But the journal, the writing, her knowledge, the timing, the eerie familiarity I'd felt around her without understanding why, the pieces began falling into place, slowly, painfully, inevitably. Clara stepped closer. We need to find out who she really is. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang again, sharp, insistent, almost frantic. Clara grabbed my wrist. Mum, don't move. But the voice that came through the door made my entire body lock up. Mary, please let me in. We need to talk. Evelyn, and this time there was no softness in her tone, only urgency, and something darker lurking underneath. I stood frozen in the doorway, unable to speak, unable to step in, unable to step back. It felt as if the world had narrowed into a single point, that dimly lit living room where my son sat across from the woman he once called Mom. The air between them felt heavy, stretched thin by years of resentment, misunderstandings and unsaid truths. My mother-in-law, May, stared at Daniel with trembling hands folded on her lap. She looked smaller, older, as if time had carved deep lines into her face that I had never bothered to notice. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was fragile. Daniel, I'm sorry. 2 words. 2 words I had waited years to hear. 2 words Daniel never believed would come from her. But instead of softening, Daniel's jaw tightened. His voice was low but sharp. Sorry? Now you say sorry? After everything? May's eyes glistened. I know I can't undo the past, but I want to explain. He leaned back, arms crossed, defensive. Explain what? The years you treated Mum like she wasn't good enough? The way you made her feel like an outsider in her own home? Or the way you never tried to bond with me? My heart thudded painfully. This wasn't how I imagined the conversation going. I wanted healing, but what I saw now was a wound ripped open. May clasped her hands tightly. You think I didn't want to love you? Her voice cracked. You think I didn't try? Daniel's brow furrowed, confusion tempering his anger. You avoided us. You judged Mom. You made everything harder. May inhaled shakily, because I was afraid. That caught Daniel off guard. Afraid? Of what? We never did anything to you. Her gaze lifted slowly, meeting his eyes, and for the first time something in her expression shifted. A raw vulnerability, a confession years too late. When your father died, she said softly, I lost everything. My husband, my home, my stability. And then you moved away. I thought you didn't need me. I thought she... Her eyes flicked briefly toward me, took you away from me completely. I stepped quietly into the room but remained behind Daniel, letting the two speak. May continued. I wasn't angry at your mother. I was jealous. Jealous of how naturally she connected with you. Jealous of how you laughed with her. Jealous that she got to see you grow up in ways I couldn't. A tear slipped down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. When your father passed, I became bitter, and bitterness doesn't come out as sadness. Her voice trembled. It comes out as cruelty. Daniel's breathing slowed. For the first time, he wasn't replying. He was listening. May swallowed hard. I pushed you both away because it hurt too much. I thought if I stayed distant, I wouldn't feel the loss so deeply. But instead, I made you feel lost. Silence filled the room, heavy, aching, real. Daniel's voice wavered. Why didn't you ever say this before? I didn't know how, she whispered, and by the time I wanted to try, I thought it was too late. There it was. The truth. Not a dramatic revelation, not a perfect redemption, just human fear, human flaws, and the cost of unspoken pain. Daniel looked down at his hands. For all his anger, all his frustration, he had never seen her like this. I took a slow breath and stepped forward. May, why did you tell us now? She looked at me, not with resentment, not with guarded eyes, but with quiet exhaustion. Because I'm tired, she said, and because I don't want to leave this world with you two thinking I never loved you. Daniel stiffened. I felt my stomach drop. Leave this world? I asked, voice trembling. What do you mean? May hesitated, and that hesitation alone made my heart race. I went to the hospital last month, she said quietly. My health isn't good. The doctor said I should prepare myself. The room seemed to tilt. Even Daniel's breath hitched. What? He said sharply. What are you talking about? What's wrong? She shook her head gently. It's not important. I don't want pity. I don't want regret to be the only thing that connects us again. Daniel stood so quickly the chair scraped the floor. No, you don't get to drop that and act like it's nothing. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why didn't you... His voice cracked. Why didn't you trust me? May looked down at her fragile hands. I didn't want to be a burden. He stared at her, shocked, devastated, angry at himself, angry at her, angry at time for moving too fast and too silently. I placed a hand on his arm. Daniel. He pulled away, pacing. His emotions were spilling out faster than he could contain them. All those years, you acted cold, distant. I thought you hated us. His words trembled. But you were hurting, and I never saw it. May's face softened with a sad, apologetic smile. You were a child. You weren't supposed to see it. Daniel sank back into his seat, burying his face in his hands. For a long moment he didn't move. Not a breath, not a sound. Then he whispered, I would have tried. If I had known, I would have tried. May slowly reached out, her hand hovering uncertainly, as if afraid to cross the invisible line she had built herself. Can I hold your hand? She asked. Daniel stared at her, at the wrinkles, the trembling fingers, the woman who had carried so much pain alone. Then slowly, he placed his hand in hers. May let out a breath, a fragile, breaking breath, as if she had been waiting years for that single moment of connection. Daniel's shoulders shook. Why didn't you tell me you were sick?" His voice was small now, barely above a whisper. "Because I wanted you to come back to me out of love," she said, "not out of guilt." Those words shattered the last piece of distance between them. Daniel leaned forward and pulled her gently into a hug. The kind of hug she had longed for but never expected to receive again. May sobbed softly into his shoulder, her frail body trembling. And in that moment, I saw something I had never seen before: a mother mourning her mistakes, a son rediscovering his mother, two broken hearts learning how to beat again, side by side, not apart. I felt tears gathering in my eyes. This was the beginning of healing. Not perfect, not finished, but real, and for the first time. I saw hope. That night, after everything unfolded in the living room, the house felt strangely quiet. Not empty, just softer, as if the walls themselves had exhaled after holding their breath for too many years. I watched from the kitchen doorway as Daniel helped May slowly to her room. His steps were gentle, cautious, almost protective, a stark contrast to the tension that had gripped him only hours earlier. May leaned slightly on his arm, her frail figure illuminated by the warm hallway light. She looked older than I ever allowed myself to see. Age had crept up on her quietly, silently, like a shadow that grew longer each year. And I realized we had missed it, both of us. Daniel closed her door softly, almost reverently, and turned toward me. The moment he saw my face, whatever strength he was holding on to broke. He stepped into me, resting his forehead against my shoulder. "How did I not know?" he whispered. His voice was thick, not with anger anymore, but grief. I wrapped my arms around him, stroking his back slowly. "Because she hid it," I said gently, "and because you were hurting too." We stood there for a while, neither of us speaking. The weight of the night pressed down on us. Not unbearable, but undeniable. Eventually he pulled back, eyes red, but clearer than before. "I need to do better," he said. "She's still my mother." I nodded. "And she finally wants the chance to be that again." He exhaled, long and heavy. "Yeah, I guess we both deserve another chance." The next morning, sunlight filtered through the curtains as I prepared breakfast. The house felt strangely peaceful, a fragile peace that could shatter with one wrong step, but peace nonetheless. May emerged from her room slowly, her hair neatly combed, her clothes tidier than usual. She walked toward the table with a faint, almost shy smile, as if unsure whether she was welcome. "You should sit," I said softly. "Let me get you some tea." She shook her head. "I can help." "No," I smiled. "Today you just rest." Her eyes glistened just slightly. Something in my small gesture seemed to catch her off guard. Maybe because kindness had been scarce between us for years, buried under misunderstandings neither of us dared to address. Daniel entered then, and May straightened automatically, her expression tightening. Old habits, old defences, but he offered her a gentle smile. "Morning, Mom." The way her breath hitched. It was small, but I saw it, a lifetime of longing compressed into one simple word. "Morning," she whispered back. We sat around the table, an oddly delicate family portrait. Daniel occasionally glanced at her, unsure of what to say, and May kept smoothing her napkin, her fingers trembling with nerves she tried to hide. Finally, Daniel spoke. "You look tired. Did you sleep okay?" May paused, surprised by his concern. "I slept better than I have in a long time." "That's good," he said softly. "If you need anything, you can tell me." Her lips trembled into a weak smile. "Thank you." It wasn't much, but it was a start. The Doctor's Truth. Later that afternoon, I drove May to her follow-up appointment. Daniel wanted to come, but she insisted she could handle it, though I suspected what she really meant was, I don't want him to worry. She sat quietly beside me in the car, her hands clasped tightly together. You should let Daniel in, I said, gently. She hesitated. He already has so much on his plate. I don't want to be the reason he carries more. Let him decide that, I said. He's grown now, and he wants to try. Her eyes softened. I hurt him so much. And he hurt you too, I replied. But that's what families do sometimes. What matters is that you both want to fix it now. She looked away, silent. The doctor was kind, but direct. May's condition wasn't immediately life-threatening, not yet. But it was serious enough to require monitoring, medication, and lifestyle changes. As he explained everything, May nodded politely, but her shoulders slumped further with every word. She wasn't afraid of dying. I could see that. She was afraid of being a burden while living. When we left the room, she walked slower, not because of her illness, but because of the weight of acknowledging it. In the parking lot, she finally spoke. Don't tell Daniel, she whispered. May, I said gently, he deserves to know. Her voice cracked. I don't want him to pity me. I don't want him to feel trapped. I want him to come home because he wants us, not because he feels responsible. I looked at her, really looked, past the stubbornness, past the pride, past the years of tension, and what I saw was a mother terrified of losing the last chance she had with her son. He won't pity you, I said softly. He'll love you. Her eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to accept that. As ofte kaining. When we got home, Daniel was waiting anxiously by the door. What did the doctor say? He asked quickly. May opened her mouth but nothing came out. I placed a gentle hand on her back. We can talk inside, I said. May walked past Daniel, and for a moment their eyes met, a fragile bridge forming between them. Inside, she sat on the couch, hands shaking. Daniel crouched in front of her. Mum, he said softly, whatever it is, we can handle it. Together. Her lips quivered. I don't want to be a burden. His eyes widened. Hurt, disbelief, love, all tangled together. You won't be, he whispered. Not now. Not ever. A single tear slid down her cheek. She closed her eyes and let herself lean slightly into his touch when he placed a hand on her arm. It was small, but to her, it was everything. The shift over the next few days, something changed. Subtle, gradual, but real. Daniel checked on her more often. May smiled more, carefully, timidly, but those smiles grew a little stronger each day. She started joining us for meals, for tea, for quiet moments on the porch. She watched Daniel from across the room like a mother memorizing her child all over again. And Daniel, he softened too. He asked about her past, her favourite foods, her childhood stories, things he had never cared to know before. One evening, as the sun dipped into the horizon, May whispered to me, I thought I had lost him forever. You didn't, I said. You just needed to open the door again. She looked down, voice trembling. I was the one who closed it, wasn't I? Yes, I said gently, but you're the one opening it now. Tears slipped quietly down her cheeks. I hope it's not too late. I shook my head. It's never too late to love your child. And in the warm glow of that fading sunset, I knew. We were no longer standing in the ruins of what had been broken. We were rebuilding, one fragile piece at a time, just when I thought things were finally settling, when the days moved with a gentler rhythm, and the house felt less suffocating, less haunted. The shadows returned. Not the kind that hide in dark corners or whisper in empty hallways. No, these were the shadows that come from people, from the past, from wounds left unhealed. It began on a Wednesday afternoon. I had just finished folding laundry when I heard a soft knock at the front door. Not urgent, not aggressive, just deliberate. A kind of knock that made my stomach tighten for reasons I didn't yet understand. When I opened the door, I froze. It was her, the woman I had once befriended, the one whose presence had slowly poisoned my peace, whose manipulations had twisted themselves into the quiet corners of my home, the one who smiled with her lips but not her eyes, the one I had tried, desperately, to forget. She stood there dressed in the same muted shades she always wore, her hands clasped in front of her like she had rehearsed the pose in a mirror. Her expression was soft, but her eyes, they were cold, always cold. "Mary," she said lightly, "it's been a while." My breath stalled in my chest. "What are you doing here?" She tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Is that any way to greet a friend?" "You're not my friend." Her smile tightened. "You invited me into your life once. You don't get to rewrite history so easily." I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. "You need to leave. We're done. Whatever game you were playing, or it ends here." She blinked, her expression shifting in a way I couldn't quite read. "You think I came here to cause trouble?" "You always do?" For a moment she just stared at me, studying me, calculating. Then she sighed dramatically, glancing past me toward the house. "How is she, the old woman?" My pulse spiked. "You don't get to ask about her." She smirked. "She's sick, isn't she?" I could tell. The way she said it, too confident, too knowing, made my skin crawl. "Stay away from my family," I said quietly but firmly. Her eyes sharpened. "Your family? That's interesting, Mary, because last time I checked, you were the outsider, the second wife who never quite fit." Her words sliced deep, not because they were true, but because they were designed to hurt. I said, "Leave." She took a step forward instead. "You never should have cut me off," she murmured. "You don't understand what you've done." A chill rippled through me. "What do you want?" She leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. "To finish what I started." I stepped back instinctively. "You're not coming inside." Her lips curved. "Oh, Mary, you have no idea how much you've already let inside." Then she walked away, slowly, calmly, as if she were strolling through a park instead of leaving me trembling on my own doorstep. Seeds of doubt. That evening, as we sat down for dinner, I couldn't shake the unease clawing at my stomach. Daniel noticed immediately. "You okay?" he asked quietly. I forced a smile. "Just tired." May watched me too. Her gaze wasn't sharp like it once was. It was gentler now, but observant, worried. "You're pale," she said softly. "Something happened." I hesitated. For weeks we had been rebuilding trust, carefully, painstakingly. I didn't want to shatter the fragile peace by reviving old tensions. But lies, even small ones, had a way of rotting everything they touched. So I told them. Not everything, not yet, but enough. "That woman came by," I said quietly. "The one I told you about before." Daniel frowned. "The one who kept showing up around the house." I nodded. "She was here today." May stiffened. "Why?" "I don't know," I admitted, but it didn't feel right. Daniel's jaw tightened. The calm he had regained over the past days evaporated instantly. "What did she want?" "She didn't say anything directly," I replied, but it felt like a threat. He stood abruptly. "Where is she now?" I reached for his arm. "Daniel, stop. You can't go looking for her." "She came to our house, Mum. She's trying to mess with you again." "She's trying to mess with all of us," I said. "That's what she does." May's voice trembled. "I don't like this. I don't want any more trouble." Daniel softened a little. "We're not in danger. She's just someone who likes stirring chaos." That was true, but not the whole truth, because deep inside I knew she wasn't done with me, she wasn't done with us, and I didn't know why. The first sign. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I walked down the hallway to check on May. Her door was slightly ajar, something she never did. She always liked it completely open, or completely closed. I pushed it gently. "May?" I whispered. She was sleeping, breathing softly, her chest rising and falling with a steady rhythm. But something was off. A faint scent lingered in the room. Not May's perfume, not the lavender candle she used. Something else. Something I recognized. The woman's scent. That familiar, unsettling trace of jasmine and sandalwood she wore like a second skin. My heart pounded against my ribs. No, it couldn't be. She hadn't been inside. She couldn't have been. I stepped back into the hallway, scanning the shadows, listening for anything out of place. Nothing. No footprints, no movement, just the quiet hum of the house. But my instincts screamed that something wasn't right. I returned to May's room and closed the door gently. Then I checked the locks on every window, every door, every corner. It wasn't paranoia, it was instinct. And instinct had kept me alive more times than I cared to admit. A confession. The next morning, May approached me while Daniel was out picking up groceries. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. Her hands trembled as she sat. Her gaze avoided mine. "I saw her," she whispered. My breath caught. "When?" "That night, when you and Daniel were arguing about me. I woke up and went to get water. She was standing in the dark at the end of the hallway. My blood ran cold. Why didn't you say anything?" May swallowed hard. I thought maybe I imagined it. She didn't move. She just stood there watching me. Her face was calm. Too calm. A chill slid down my spine. "May, she has no reason to be here." May shook her head slowly. "No, she has a reason. I just don't know what it is." Her next words made my stomach twist. "And Mary, I don't think she came here because of you." I frowned. "Then who?" May's eyes lifted to mine, so soft, frightened, certain. "Daniel." I froze. May continued, her voice almost breaking. "She told me something months ago, something I didn't want to believe." My heart pounded harder with every second. "She said she knew Daniel, before." The room went silent. Painful, suffocating silence. I felt my breath catch as a weight I didn't yet understand settled heavily on my chest. "What did she mean?" I whispered. May closed her eyes. She said Daniel owes her something. And with those words, the fragile peace we had rebuilt began to crack again, not with noise or chaos, but with the quiet, devastating truth that the past wasn't done with us. Not yet. The moment May said Daniel owed her something, it felt as though the floor beneath me shifted. I couldn't breathe for a second. The room felt smaller, like the walls were inching closer, demanding I confront something I wasn't prepared to hear. I stared at May, searching her face for some sign she might be mistaken. But she wasn't. She had grown more thoughtful these past weeks, more grounded. The "what exactly did she owe us?" May exhaled shakily, her fingers nervously twisting the sleeve of her sweater. She said Daniel took something from her, something important. She didn't. A chill crawled up my spine. That smile, that unsettling, knowing curve of her lips. I had seen it too. Man, I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to think that Daniel, my son, the boy I raised on my own after years of trying to protect him from life's harsher edges, had been involved with that woman in any capacity. But her presence in our lives wasn't random. It never had been. She hadn't just stumbled into my world by accident. She came with intention, with knowledge, with a PL, and now, it seemed, with history. I went silent, lost in the sudden heaviness of realization. When the front door opened minutes later and Daniel walked in with grocery bags in his arms, I flinched at the sound. He smiled at us, oblivious to the storm his name had just stirred. But something in me had shifted. I could no longer pretend that the unease was just paranoia or coincidence. I had to know the truth. After dinner, once the dishes were washed and May had gone upstairs to rest, I found him in the living room, scrolling through his phone. His expression softened when he saw me approaching, unaware of the weight I carried in my chest. "Mum? What's wrong?" I sat beside him, and for the first time that night, I couldn't hide the tremor in my voice. "Daniel, I need you to tell me the truth. Who is she?" His smile faded instantly. His jaw tightened. A shadow crossed his eyes, a shadow I didn't recognize. "Why are you asking me that?" he said quietly. "Because she came here today," I replied, "and because May saw her before, and because she told May something about you, something I can't ignore." He swallowed hard, avoiding my gaze. "What did she say?" "That you owe her something." His hand stiffened. Silence stretched between us. Heavy, suffocating. Then Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees, rubbing his palms together nervously. "I didn't think she'd come back," he said in a low voice. "I really thought it was over." My heart pounded. What was over? He lifted his head, and what I saw in his eyes was not guilt, but fear. "I met her years ago," he confessed, "before I married May, before I got my life together. I was in a bad place, Mom. I didn't tell you because you already had so much to deal with." He paused, breathing shakily. "She helped me with something. At first she seemed kind, supportive. But then things changed. She wanted control. She wanted influence over my decisions. She wanted to know everything about my life. She kept appearing everywhere, calling, showing up, uninvited." My chest tightened painfully. "That's what she does," I whispered. "She told me I owed her," he continued. "But it wasn't money or favors. It was attention, devotion, obedience. She wanted to own me." The word sent a shiver down my spine. "And I didn't know how to pull away without consequences," he said, "until one day I just cut her off." My breath stuttered. "You never told me." "I was ashamed," he said softly. "I didn't want you, or May, to see what I had let into my life." A painful ache filled my throat. "And now she's back," he murmured, "because I didn't give her what she wanted." For a moment, the room felt frozen. The truth hung between us like a fragile thread about to snap. Everything fell into place. The strange visits, the feeling of being watched, the intrusion into our home. She wasn't after me. She wasn't after May. She wanted Daniel. And she was willing to infiltrate every corner of our life to reclaim the control she once had over him. I placed my hand over his. "We're not letting her near this family ever again." He nodded, but I could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the fear of someone who had tried to outrun their past, only for it to catch up in the most horrifying way. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed awake listening for sounds, footsteps, doors, the unsettling rustle of something not quite natural. But the house was still. The quiet didn't comfort me, though. It felt like the pause before a storm. The next morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait for her to strike again, to appear in the hallway like a phantom or knock on my door with that cold smile. I was going to confront her. I found her standing near the old oak tree at the end of the street, as if she had been waiting. When she turned to face me, her expression didn't shift at all. She looked almost amused. "You came?" she said softly. "You stay away from my son," I said. She tilted her head. "Your son owes me." "He owes you nothing," I cut in. "Whatever hold you thought you had over him, it ends now." She smiled, slow and chilling. "Oh, Mary, you think this is about him?" I froze. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "No, this was always about you. My breath caught. Me? I needed to know how far you would go to protect him, she murmured. How much you were willing to sacrifice. And now I have my answer. I stared at her, stunned, trying to make sense of her words. You were the one who opened the door to me, she whispered. You invited me in. You gave me access. I didn't force my way into your home. You offered it. Rage surged in my chest. I trusted you. That was my mistake. She leaned in, her eyes dark and gleaming. And now you've learned your lesson. Something inside me snapped, not with violence, but with clarity. You're done, I said. I'm not afraid of you anymore. Her smile finally faded. I turned and walked away, my heart pounding, but certain, for the first time, that she no longer had a place in my life, not in my home, not in my mind, not in my fear. When I reached the house, Daniel and May were waiting by the door, both anxious, both ready to face whatever came next. But as I looked at them, at the fragile little family we were still building, I felt something shift inside me, a strength I hadn't known I still carried, because the truth was simple. I had let her in, and I was the one who finally shut her out. And in that quiet, steady moment, I understood the lesson I had fought too long to see. Some people don't break your home. You break it yourself when you let the wrong ones in. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to leave a comment. Your support means everything.